Hello, everybody. My name is Tyler Russo, and this is the KO Podcast, episode number 22. In this episode, I will be reviewing UFC Fight Night, Antetokounmpo vs. Cutelaba. Also, I will be reviewing Bellator 288. And, of course, this weekend, the UFC is back with UFC Orlando. Let's get into this episode. Ring that bell. Before I get into this card, I just hope that you had an amazing Thanksgiving. I hope that you were able to spend it with your family and loved ones. And I hope you enjoyed all of the football that was on Thanksgiving. Unfortunately, my Patriots lost to Minnesota, so that kind of ruined the latter part of my Thanksgiving. But other than that, it was good. I had good food. I was around good people. And I hope you had the same experience. Now, let's get into this card that was before Thanksgiving. So it feels like this card happened a while ago. The first fight that I want to get into was the first fight of the card. We had Natalia Silva, and she had a crazy knockout in the third round that got this card off to a pretty entertaining start. Then the card began to settle down. We had the rest of the prelims were all decision wins. We had Vanessa Demopoulos picking up a decision victory. We also had Ricky Torsius picking up a decision victory. Miles John picked up a decision victory, and also Jennifer Maia picked up a decision victory. Now we move on to the main card, and obviously the main event was supposed to be Derek Lewis and Sergey Spivak, but during the prelim portion of the show, the fight was called off due to Derek Lewis having, I believe it was, stomach issues. So we lost the main event mid-show, which was kind of disappointing. And to be honest, it dragged the energy of the card down. Obviously, losing a main event in the middle of the show, that is just, pretty brutal. But starting off the main card, we had Charles Johnson taking on Ziglas Zumgalov. And Charles Johnson gets the decision, but this fight was probably the longest 3-round fight that I've ever watched. So many stoppages, for timeouts because of illegal blows from both guys. They both did it to each other. It was unintentional, but still, eye poke, groin shot. This fight dragged out for a long time. Moving on, we had Jack Della Maddalena taking on Danny Roberts, and Maddalena does what he always does, constant forward pressure, and he sat Danny Roberts down a couple times, and Roberts, very, very tough, but Maddalena was just too much for him. Maddalena gets the TKO victory in the first round, and he continues to roll in the UFC. Very excited to see what his next fight is. Now, moving on, we had another welterweight bout. We had Andre Filio taking on Muslim Sakharov, and the King of Kung Fu gets the TKO victory in the third round. This was a pretty entertaining fight. Filio started this fight off really well, but Muslim Sakharov came on strong, and he threw a spinning wheel kick to the head of Filio that started the ending sequence, and Muslim Sakharov gets the victory. Moving on to the co-main event, we had Chase Sherman taking on Waldo Cortez Acosta, and Cortez Acosta gets the decision victory that now moves him to 9-0. And moving on to the main event, this was just a 3-round main event because of, all of the craziness that happened during the show with the main event dropping out. So we had Kennedy Nzechukwu taking on Ilan Kutilava, and Kennedy Nzechukwu gets the TKO finish in the second round. Very impressive performance. More eyes, put on him because of that main event slot. So he went out there, performed really well, and he looked good in the fight. So maybe one more fight if we can win, then he could get a ranked opponent. I think that would be, a pretty fair rise for him. He's a very, very good striker. And, he's got really good elbows as well. And that was this card that happened, again, right before Thanksgiving. Now, let's move on to Bellator. Bellator 288 took place in Chicago, Illinois. And on the prelims, I pointed out 3 prospects to look out for, and all 3 of them had very, very impressive wins. We had Jordan Newman getting a submission victory. We had Sullivan Culley getting a brutal KO ground and pound finish. Very impressed by Culley. And we also had Archie Colgan getting a TKO victory. So shout out to all 3 of those prospects getting very dominant victories. All 3 of them had great showcases. And now let's get to the main card. Starting off the main card, we had Roman Felio taking on Levin Korkiligi. I probably butchered his last name. I apologize. But Coach Levy gets the win, and Roman Fiallo suffers his first career loss. I'm still very, very high, though, on Roman Fiallo. He's such an exciting fighter. He's still so young in the sport, and I just believe this loss is going to be a great learning experience for him, and he's going to be better for it moving on in his career. Moving on, we had a heavyweight matchup. We had Tyrell Fortune taking on Daniel James, and Daniel James gets the TKO victory. A pretty big upset over Fortune, who, he's a very highly touted, heavyweight prospect in this Bellator division. But shout out to Daniel James. He got it done in front of his hometown in Chicago. Very entertaining in the cage and outside of it. Was very, entertained by his post-fight interview. He seems like a great personality, and I'm looking forward to seeing where Bellator books him next. He's a great, a good fighter, and also a amazing personality, and he rocked Fortune with a crazy uppercut, I believe it was, that just Fortune just went flying, down to the ground. And, very impressive performance by Daniel James. Moving on, we had Daniel Welch taking on Tumar Kiziv. And Tumar Kiziv gets the decision victory. This guy, he is 12-0. I did not know much about him coming into the fight, but he impressed me. He impressed me a lot in this fight. Daniel Welch, obviously a MMA veteran. Always tough to come out on top against him. So kudos to Tumar on getting his victory in his Bellator debut. Now, moving on to the co-main event, we had Patricky Pitbull defending his lightweight championship against Usman Nurmagomedov. And Usman Nurmagomedov gets the decision victory. Usman controlled this fight with his range. He's got amazing kicks, And his range management, his distance management really is what impressed me in this fight. He never let Patricky Pitbull feel comfortable in the stand-up. Even though we know that Patricky's a great striker, he's got amazing power, but Usman Nurmagomedov, he just seemed like he had a really well organized game plan, and he gets the decision victory and is now the new Bellator lightweight champion. Very excited to see how this lightweight World Grand Prix, shapes out. After his loss, Patricky Pitbull, he congratulated Usman Nurmagomedov and also, said that he wants to be in that lightweight World Grand Prix. So, he could get his revenge in that tournament. Like I said, very excited for that Grand Prix. Now, moving on to the main event, we had Nemkov taking on Anderson in a rematch. Obviously, their first fight was a no contest because of an incidental headbutt by Anderson that led Nemkov to, bleed, and they could not stop the bleeding. So this is why they rematched, and Vadim Nemkov gets the decision victory. He almost finished Anderson, in this fight, but, very close. But Anderson, obviously very, very tough. He hung in there and didn't get finished. But now Nemkov is now 16-2. Very, very interested to see kind of how this division, plays out, because, now we know who he's going to face. So he's going to face Yoel Romero, and that's going to be in Dublin. And, that's a very, very exciting matchup. I mean, Yoel Romero, obviously an exciting, action fighter, for most of his fights. So I'm very excited to see Nemkov versus Romero. So that is a fight I cannot wait for. Now, let's move on to UFC Orlando. All right, jumping into this card, a lot of names on this card that are definitely recognizable. Let's start with the prelims, of course, and this women's flyweight matchup I want to highlight. Tracy Cortez taking on Amanda Ribas. That should be a fun fight. We have a featherweight matchup. We got Darren Elkins taking on Jonathan Pierce. And something is telling me to go with Pierce to win this. Darren Elkins, obviously we all know him as the Damage, tough as nails. He is coming off of a victory, Elkins, but before that he did get finished by Cub Swanson. And Jonathan Pierce, he's on a 2-fight win streak. It just seems like momentum is on Pierce's side coming into this fight. Moving on, we have a lightweight matchup. We have Michael Johnson taking on Mark Jacasey. Now, this matchup is very interesting. We never know what type of Michael Johnson we're going to get, in any given fight. Sometimes he comes out and he looks like one of the best lightweights in the UFC, and other times, he just doesn't look good at all. And then looking at Mark Jacasey's last win, he was very wrestle heavy. Obviously, we came to know him as a striker and a guy who would stand, but his last couple fights, he's definitely changed his style. I really want to see if Jacasey's gonna stick to that style against Michael Johnson. Michael Johnson is a very good striker when he is on. So let's see what kind of fight we get, if we get Mark Jacasey just trying to hold down Michael Johnson, or if we are going to get, a striking affair between these two. Moving on, we have another lightweight bout. We got Clay Guida versus Scott Holzman. I mean, Clay Guida, this guy has been fighting forever. Former Strikeforce champion. I mean, this guy's done it all. Legendary fights in the UFC. So it's always interesting to see what Clay Guida can do. And Scott Holtzman, I personally have never seen him fight, but he last fought last year in April of 2021, and he lost to Gamarot. So, obviously that is an elite opponent that he lost to. Very curious to see how he bounces back. Moving on, we have a women's strawweight matchup. We have Angela Hill taking on Emily Ducote in this fight. I'm expecting, a stand-up affair. So, this should be one of the more entertaining fights of the night. And in the prelim main event, we have Nico Price taking on Philip Rowe. Obviously, Nico Price is an all-action fighter. He's crazy in there. You never know what exactly he's gonna do in the octagon. Really, I mean, he's done a lot of crazy things that a lot of other fighters probably wouldn't have done. He takes chances. He always looks for the finish. He's always looking for an highlight. And on the other side of this, Philip Rowe, he was supposed to fight, I believe, on that Ortega and Rodriguez card in New York. But unfortunately, he was pulled from that card. Now, he's facing Nico Price. So, Philip Rowe, his last win, I believe, was by knockout. So, obviously, he has power of his own as well. Let's move on to the main card. Kicking it off, we have Eric Anders taking on Kyle Dawkins. And the next fight is a middleweight matchup. We have Jack Hermanson taking on Roman Delotz. And Roman Delotz is coming in and replacing Derek Brunson, who I believe was injured while preparing for the fight. So Roman Delotz is now in against Jack Hermanson. Moving on, we got a heavyweight fight. We have Tai Tuivasa taking on Sergey Pavlovich. I mean, this is going to be a fun fight while it lasts. Two big dudes swinging leather and trying to put one another to sleep. You gotta love this matchup. And moving on, we have a flyweight matchup. We got Mathis Nicolou taking on Matthew Christopher Scannell. And Scannell had an amazing comeback victory in his last fight, so never count him out, obviously. Now, moving on to the co-main event, we have Brian Barberena taking on Rafael Dos Anjos. I personally am very, very excited for this fight. Brian Barberena he is such a scrappy fighter. He is tough as nails. He's on a 3-fight win streak right now. And he gets a lot of stoppage finishes. His most recent win was against Robbie Lawler, and he stopped Robbie Lawler by TKO, and that was a fight of the night. Brian Barberena always puts on a show. He's constantly got fight of the night awards. So I am looking for this fight to be a banger. And of course, Rafael Dos Anjos, former UFC lightweight champion, and he's been in this welterweight division for some time. He is coming off of re-entering the lightweight, division. He got stopped by Rafael Fiziev. So now he's back at welterweight. So, very interested to see how he looks back at welterweight. But Brian Barberena, he's a pressure fighter. He's going to stand in your face. He's going to take your best shots, and he's going to keep coming forward. Rafael Dos Anjos, probably shouldn't just stand with Brian Barberena. He's got to use his jiu-jitsu, get that clinch work going. and try to alleviate some of that pressure that Barberena's gonna put on him in this fight. Moving on to the main event, we have Stephen Wonderboy Thompson taking on Kevin Holland. This is a very, very interesting matchup. Stephen Thompson obviously has a karate background, a wide stance, good kicks, throws very accurate straight punches, and he obviously has power to finish you. And Kevin Holland, coming off of just that crazy circumstance with that whole how that Chimaev fight came to be. He didn't even really train for that. Actually, he didn't train for that fight at all. He took that fight at a catchweight, and also he took it within like a 24-hour notice in that fight. So, he's coming off of that loss, but he obviously is very well prepared and prepped. He had a full training camp. So I look to see the best Kevin Holland that we've seen before. And, Stephen Thompson, he's a very, very hard man to put away. Holland, he's got power in his hands, but I just don't see Thompson getting finished. I do see Holland winning by decision. I just think Holland, has more tools in his arsenal to win the fight. And coming into this fight, Thompson is on a 2-fight losing streak. So, this is a crossroads fight for him. Obviously, he's 39 years old. That doesn't help his case. But if Kevin Holland wins this fight, he's going to be put right in the welterweight top 10. So it's going to be very interesting to see how he shakes up this welterweight division, if he can come away with this victory against Thompson. And that's going to do it for this coverage of UFC Orlando. And that's going to do it for this episode of the KO Podcast. To keep up with the podcast, the Twitter handle is KO Pod with Ty, and you can also look it up on Twitter by just typing in the KO Podcast with Tyler Russo. Also, we have an Instagram that is the KO_podcast, and we have a YouTube channel. Just type in the KO Podcast with Tyler Russo. I hope you all have a good rest of your day. Stay safe. Stay blessed. Bye-bye.